Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Update 24 channel. I hope you're having a great day. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up before we dive into today's Young and the Restless update. The Young and the Restless spoilers hint that Phyllis Summers could be gearing up for a prison downfall. Will Kane Ashby let his partner take the blame when his plot inevitably backfires? In YNR's January 22nd episode, Chelsea Lawson and Adam Newman talked about the scandalous stories they were putting out in the news. Although they had to be careful about the language used from a legal standpoint, the articles heavily implied that Kane and Phyllis committed computer fraud by accessing the Newman system with chaotic intentions. Adam and Chelsea talked about the broken laws that may have been involved, as well as Victoria Newman's FTC complaint. There's no guarantee anything can be traced, but Chelsea and Adam are convinced that Phyllis will be the one who goes down if that happens. Phyllis installed the AI program, so it'll presumably look like she was targeting Victor if she gets caught. Victor can just lie and pretend he never had a deal with Phyllis at all. Likewise, Kane could easily claim that Phyllis did everything on her own. Phyllis could become the scapegoat if this AI program mess ultimately blows up in Kane's face. Since Phyllis is the hacking expert with plenty of computer skills, she may have to take the fall alone while Kane gets off scot-free. Whatever the case, Phyllis is on top of the world right now, but she's going to take a nosedive sooner or later. Whenever a character is this arrogant, it usually means a major comeuppance is on the way. Phyllis isn't listening to any warnings when it comes to the dangerous path she's put herself on. Even Nick wants to grind Phyllis to dust for her role in this Newman takeover nightmare, so he won't be interested in helping her when things fall apart. Summer Newman and Daniel Romalotti Jr. may have to deal with some Phyllis arrest drama down the road. Will Phyllis fear she's facing prison time and regret ever partnering with Kane once he betrays her? The Young and the Restless spoilers say some terrible twists and turns are ahead for Phyllis, so stick with us for updates on any shockers to come. The Young and the Restless spoilers are in for Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. In tomorrow's episode, fans can expect Victoria Newman to attack. Our Newman finds Nikki Newman in a compromising position. Keep reading, and let's talk about what is coming up in the CBS soap opera Nick Newman's Big Secret. Let's start off with Nick Newman. Fans know that the man is in a lot of pain and should be in the hospital. Instead, he insists on being there to help deal with Matt Clark. When Sharon Newman isn't looking, the man has been taking handfuls of pain pills. Now that Nick is outside on the porch, he found fentanyl in his pocket. If Nick ends up taking those pills, we could see a very dark and destructive personality emerge. Of course, Sharon will be clueless, at least for the time being. Victoria Newman attacks over at Kane's train. Victoria interrupts the tycoon's chat with Phyllis Summers. The brunette makes it clear that they will get Newman Enterprises over her dead body. However, Phyllis and Kane will insist that there is nothing they can do about it and that the ball is already rolling. Victoria ends up striking Kane where it hurts. Fans know that the one thing that can get to Kane is Lily Winters. I could see Victoria calling or video chatting Lily to tell her what Kane has done now. Victoria might even suggest a radical plan to Lily, but it requires her full cooperation. Nikki Newman's frantic panic. The Young and the Restless spoilers for the next episode reveal that Nikki will be in a comforting embrace with Jack Abbott. While Jack was just reassuring his friend, Victor will see it as something entirely different. For Victor, this will just be another sin to add to Jack's list. It will also be another reason for Victor to question Nikki's loyalty. Victor Newman's fury. Even though Victor will likely let Jack leave the mansion, the patriarch could get into another wicked fight with his wife. As if Victor doesn't have enough to deal with already. However, we also know that Victor and Jack have some sort of alliance in the future. That sounds like the drama with Kane and Phyllis isn't over just yet. Which storyline are you looking forward to seeing the most on Thursday, January 22nd, 2026? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Remember to keep watching the soap on CBS or Paramount Plus to find out what happens next. The Young and the Restless spoilers for Thursday, January 22nd, imply some major bombshells up ahead. Someone issues a dire warning, while another has a medical worry. Plus, a daughter unleashes her wrath. What's on the horizon for Thursday? Time to find out. The mustaches warning. The Young and the Restless spoilers for Thursday, January 22nd, hint that Victor Newman will issue a warning to none other than Jack Abbott. During the Wednesday, January 21st episode, the mustache caught Jack in his own home, hugging his wife, Nikki Newman. Victor will feel the disrespect seething from within and likely lash out at both Nikki and Jack during Thursday's show. However, Jackie will likely bear the brunt of yet another threat from Victor. While Victor has shifted his focus off the Abbotts in light of Newman's current crisis, at the hands of Kane Ashby and Phyllis Summers, seeing Jack hugging Nikki will cause him to explode. Read this, The Young and the Restless spoilers. 4 heartbreaking losses. These characters suffer crushing blows. Victoria Newman's wrath. Speaking of Kane, Victoria Newman will prove to her new nemesis that she is her father's daughter by hitting him where it hurts. These two pondered a romance before Kane left Genoa City, so will she poke him about their failed history? They only shared a kiss here and there, but it was enough to cause Lily Winters to leave him for good. Either way, it sounds like Victoria will rattle Kane, so it will be an encounter fans won't want to miss. Sharon Newman's worry. Finally, The Young and the Restless spoilers for Thursday imply that Sharon Newman will worry about Nick Newman's condition. Who could blame her? He left the hospital before he could properly recover. He's clearly in pain, and the stress he's had to deal with between Matt Clark and the drama at Newman Enterprises has been far too much. Will she take him back to the hospital? Will something terrible happen before she can? What storyline are you most looking forward to during Thursday's show? Tune into the CBS Soap Daily and check out us often for the best Young and the Restless updates, spoilers, and news. The narrative of any public crisis, be it a pandemic, an environmental disaster, or a societal upheaval, is often written in the stark, impersonal language of data. We track case numbers, economic downturns, mortality rates, and policy responses. These metrics form the official history, the chartable trajectory of the event. Yet, beneath this veneer of statistics lies a far more human and devastating landscape, one where abstract warnings become personal terror, systemic failures translate into intimate medical nightmares, and collective grief crystallizes into a single, burning point of a daughter's wrath. To understand the true cost of a crisis, we must move beyond the dire warnings broadcast on news cycles and listen to the quieter, more profound stories of medical worry and the transformative, righteous anger it can spawn in those who bear witness. The dire warning, from abstract to visceral. A dire warning begins as a signal in the noise. It is the epidemiologist's grim projection at a press conference, the scientist's urgent paper on rising sea levels, the economist's forecast of cascading bank failures. Initially, for most, it is information, not experience. It is something to be debated, doubted, politically weaponized, or anxiously consumed with our morning coffee. The distance between the warning and the individual is a buffer of perceived normalcy. This buffer erodes not with a statistic, but with a first-person account. The dire warning stops being cases are rising in the region and becomes, my colleague is on a ventilator. It ceases to be the healthcare system is under strain and transforms into the ambulance took 3 hours to arrive. The abstract threat lands with visceral force when it interrupts the daily rhythm of life. When a parent's cough doesn't subside, when the floodwater breaches the porch step, when the layoff notice arrives not to a faceless department but to your inbox. The psychological impact of this shift is profound. The world becomes newly perilous. A simple grocery run requires risk assessment. A handshake becomes a potential threat. The very air, the water, the stability of the ground beneath one's feet can feel suspect. This constant, low-grade calculation is the personal internalization of the dire warning. It is no longer something out there. It is in here, in the mind, coloring every decision and interaction with a tint of fear. This state of hypervigilance is the fertile ground in which the seeds of medical worry are sown. Medical worry, the private agony of uncertainty. If the dire warning is the broadcast, medical worry is the silent, static-filled vigil in a hospital waiting room at 3 a.m. It is the domain of the personal, the body betrayed. Medical worry is not generalized anxiety about a virus. It is the specific, crushing weight of watching a loved one struggle for breath, of not being allowed to hold their hand, of communicating through a tablet screen held by a weary nurse. It is the frantic search for a medication that is out of stock, the desperate phone calls to find an available specialist, the deciphering of confusing and contradictory advice. This worry is compounded by systemic failure. The dire warning often predicts systemic collapse, but medical worry lives in its reality. It is the echo of a busy signal, the sight of overflowing ERs, the realization that the standard of care has been downgraded to crisis triage. The patient is no longer just fighting an illness. They are navigating a system pushed past its breaking point. Families become amateur medical advocates, logistical coordinators, and bedside cheerleaders, all while grappling with their own terror. The emotional labor is exhausting and isolating. Furthermore, medical worry often carries a bitter edge of what if and if only. What if we had been more careful? If only we had access to that test or treatment sooner. If only the official guidance had been clearer from the start. This retroactive bargaining is a torture of its own, a loop of imagined alternative scenarios where the outcome might have been different. It is in this cauldron of fear, exhaustion, helplessness, and retrospective doubt that a more potent and enduring emotion begins to form: wrath. A daughter's wrath, grief alchemized into action. The wrath of a daughter, or a son, a parent, a partner, is not a simple outburst of anger. It is grief alchemized by the perception of injustice. It is the culmination of the dire warning ignored and the medical worry endured. This wrath is born from a specific, devastating conclusion. This did not have to happen. When a loved one is lost or irrevocably harmed during a crisis, the grieving mind searches for reason, for a target for its pain. The abstract pathogen, the natural disaster, or the economic force is an insufficient vessel for such profound hurt. The gaze turns instead to the human decisions that magnified the crisis. The leaders who dismissed the early warnings for political expediency, the corporations that prioritized profit over preparedness or safety, the spreaders of misinformation who weaponized doubt, the systemic inequities that made some populations catastrophically more vulnerable than others. A daughter's wrath is scalpel-sharp and personally directed. It rejects the passive language of victim of circumstance and embraces the active language of failed by those in power. She has seen the timeline, the memos that were buried, the experts who were silenced, the funds that were cut, the warnings labeled alarmist. Her personal tragedy becomes a case study in negligence. The love she held for her parent now fuels a fierce, unrelenting demand for accountability. This wrath is transformative. It can propel a person from private mourning into public advocacy. The daughter may become an organizer, a speaker at rallies, a relentless presence at town halls, or a plaintiff in a lawsuit. Her story, once a private agony, becomes a powerful tool to pierce the public's numbness. She is no longer just grieving, she is testifying. Her anger gives her a voice where before there was only paralyzing sorrow. It provides a framework to make sense of the senseless, to channel helplessness into a fight for change, so that others might be spared her family's pain. The interconnected cycle. These three states, dire warning, medical worry, a daughter's wrath, are not linear stages but part of a vicious, reinforcing cycle that defines the human experience of crisis. The dire warning, if unheeded, directly fuels medical worry. A delayed lockdown leads to unchecked spread, overwhelming hospitals, and creating the very conditions of scarcity and desperation that families then endure. Downplayed risks lead to inadequate personal protection, increasing the likelihood of infection. The failure to heed the warning is the first link in the chain that ends in a crowded ICU. The experience of medical worry, in turn, validates and personalizes the dire warning. Those who lived through the medical nightmare become the most credible and passionate carriers of the warning for the next potential crisis. They speak not in projections, but in lived trauma. Their testimony is the warning, stripped of abstraction. And finally, medical worry, when it ends in loss or profound suffering, crystallizes into a daughter's wrath. This wrath then loops back to confront the source of the unheeded dire warning. It demands to know why the signals were ignored. It uses the intimate details of medical suffering as evidence in the court of public opinion against those deemed responsible. This wrath becomes the political and social force that, ideally, ensures future warnings are taken more seriously. It is the immune response of the body politic, painful but necessary for learning and adaptation. The broader implications, beyond the individual story. While framed here through an intimate lens, this triad has profound societal implications. A population experiencing mass medical worry is a traumatized population, one facing collective anxiety, eroded trust in institutions, and a loss of social cohesion. The dire warnings of experts become less effective if the public feels abandoned by the very systems those experts represent. Meanwhile, collective wrath, the aggregation of countless personal rages, can reshape political landscapes. It can topple governments, spur landmark legislation like the creation of the FDA after public outrage over tainted drugs, or new building codes after deadly earthquakes, and force corporate accountability. This wrath, however, is a volatile force. If it is not channeled into constructive change through transparent accountability and systemic reform, it can curdle into nihilism, conspiracy theories, or societal fracture. The challenge for leadership is not to avoid this wrath, for it is a justified and inevitable outcome of catastrophic failure, but to acknowledge it, hear its stories, and direct its energy toward prevention and justice. Conclusion: listening to the human frequency in the aftermath of any crisis. The official reports will document the timeline of warnings, the capacity of medical systems, and the mortality statistics. These are essential. But if we stop there, we miss the core of the catastrophe. We must learn to listen on a different frequency, to the stories that carry the emotional truth of the event. The journey from a dire warning to medical worry to a daughter's wrath is the arc of preventable tragedy. It maps the translation of systemic failure into human suffering, and of human suffering into a powerful call for change. It reminds us that behind every data point is a person who breathed, loved, and worried, and often, someone left behind who loves, grieves, and rages. To honor those we lose in crises, and to truly prepare for those to come, we must do more than upgrade our early warning systems and stockpile medical supplies. We must cultivate a societal ethic of proactive compassion, the kind that hears the dire warning not as a political inconvenience, but as a moral imperative to protect the vulnerable. We must build systems robust enough to handle the medical worry without compounding it with logistical agony. And we must have the courage to face the daughter's wrath not as a threat to be managed, but as a sacred demand for accountability, the final, furious, and necessary testament to a love that outlasts even death, and a burning insistence that the lessons of the past safeguard the lives of the future. We narrate our collective crises in the cold, hard syntax of data, logarithmic curves, excess mortality statistics, economic contraction percentages, and policy timelines. These form the official record, the sterilized autopsy of the event. Yet, to confine our understanding to these metrics is to miss the essential human truth of catastrophe. The real story unfolds not in press briefings or epidemiological models, but in the quiet, terrified spaces between heartbeats, in the fluorescent glare of overcrowded hospital corridors, and in the seismic, life-altering silence that follows a last, ragged breath. This is the subterranean landscape where abstract alarms become cellular fear, where systemic failure is felt as a trembling hand on a fevered brow, and where grief, refusing to be passive, calcifies into a force of nature, a daughter's wrath. To comprehend the full weight of any disaster, pandemic, climate event, or societal collapse, we must trace this transformative chain, from the ignored dire warning, through the intimate hell of medical worry, to the formidable, clarifying fire of a daughter's wrath. Part 1. The dire warning, the hum of impending doom. A dire warning begins its life as a signal, a blip on the radar of experts. It is the peer-reviewed paper languishing in a specialist journal, the urgent memo ascending a bureaucratic chain, the scientist's strained voice at a congressional hearing, drowned out by political theater. For the public, it is initially noise, a headline scrolled past, a topic for pundits to debate, a cloud on a distant horizon that may yet blow over. This psychological distance is our first and most fatal defense mechanism. We hear the warning, but we do not heed it. It is information, not intuition. The transformation from background hum to visceral dread is a personal and often brutal process. The mechanism is the loss of abstraction. The warning ceases to be about community transmission and becomes the text message, "Dad's spiking a fever." He says it's hard to catch his breath. It is no longer about supply chain disruptions, but the bare shelf where the infant formula or the life-saving medication should be. It stops being rising floodwaters and becomes the muddy line creeping up the basement stairs, the photograph of a grandparent's home floating away. The buffer of normalcy shatters not with a statistic, but with a specific, irreplaceable name, face, or place now under threat. This internalization triggers a profound cognitive and emotional shift. The world becomes a minefield of risk. Ordinary acts, sending a child to school, attending a funeral, breathing the air outside during wildfire season, require exhausting calculus. Trust evaporates. We doubt surfaces, our neighbors, the very institutions designed to protect us. This state of hypervigilance, a constant, low-grade fight-or-flight response, is the psychic soil in which the more focused torment of medical worry takes root. The dire warning has now moved in. It sits at the kitchen table. It whispers in the dark. Part 2. Medical worry, the kingdom of the helpless. If the dire warning is the siren, medical worry is the interminable, silent vigil that follows. This is the private, visceral domain where crisis becomes biography. It is the unique agony of loving a body that is failing, within a system that is failing faster. Medical worry is multifaceted. It is, first, the terror of the symptom, the sound of a cough that has changed its tenor, the sight of a blue tinge around the lips, the unsteady gait that prescribes a fall. It is the frantic, middle-of-the-night research down internet rabbit holes, parsing terrifying jargon with a sleep-deprived brain. It is the surreal, dystopian experience of care through a tablet screen, of saying goodbye to a spouse of 50 years via a nurse's outstretched iPhone.